Okay, so today we are going to go over health damaging enemies. And I have my little projectile here that I made up and set to my prefab. So if you want to do that, right click, create 2D object sprites, circle, call it I called mine basic beam. You call it whatever you want your weapon to be. Two things that need to be added to this is a rigid body 2D with a gravity of 0 and a circle collider. And then we're going to get into all this, the shooting script in a minute. But first I want to talk about enemy health. So in my enemy prefab, double click that to open it. I have added enemy health script to it. So in your scripts folder, go to your enemy scripts folder and right click, create C# script, name it enemy health. Alright, and so in enemy health there are a couple floats, public float health and a float max health. As a matter of fact, this really needs to be switched around because we don't need, yeah, we have to have health. So we have to have that public, and max health should be public also. And the reason why is so that you can set it in the inspector and not have to come back and do this. So public float max health, I just have it equal to 10 for now. On enable, so private void on enable, I have health equals max health. So every time this thing is enabled, every time we cut it off and cut it back on again, health is going to equal max health. Remember we talked about our enemy pool, and when one is deactivated, then it can be pulled again, and it goes back into the pool, and then the pool can, or the enemy spawner can pull it from the pool again. So every time the enemy spawner grabs it from the pool, it's going to activate, and max health is going to equal max health. The update method, just a couple lines of code. If health is less or equal to 0, then die. And in die, we're just going to set the game object to false, so it goes back into the pool. Now this void, you noticed, is not being called anywhere. And that's the point. And I'll show you why and how we're going to fix that, what we're going to do with that in a minute. But this is void take health, and in this health we're passing through a damage float. So this, whatever's passed into this is what the health is going to be subtracted by. So minus equals means that we're going to subtract by damage. So health minus damage, or whatever is left after health is minus damage, is what health is equal to. So health minus equal damage, that's what that means. Alright, so let's go to our basic beam projectile. This is the one that we just created and made a prefab of. So in this we have a float speed, damage, then we have public ints, minimum damage and maximum damage, and then a damage modifier. So this is here, if you want to have an item that increases the damage, you can have do that through the damage modifier. This does not need to be there, so we'll just take that out. I work on these scripts, and sometimes when you read back through the scripts you find something that you didn't mean to leave. So on this one, on enable, damage is going to equal a random number between minimum damage and maximum damage, times the damage modifier. So if the damage modifier is 1 times 1, whatever this is times 1 is whatever this number is. If it's 1.1, then it's 10% more than whatever the number that's calculated here is. So that's why we have a damage modifier. So in this, an update, we're just going to translate it to the right, times speed times time dot delta time, And then if that means vector2.write is let me type it out. So this is a vector2.write. It's going to be 1 on the x-axis and 0 on the y-axis. Now we got to get rid of this so it doesn't mess up our code. If it comes into contact with anything, so on collision enter 2D. So if we're working in 2D, we have to use 2D. And it's calling the collider that it's colliding with, collision. If collision .gameObject.tag equals enemy, collision, or the enemy that it's colliding with, .gameObject, get component enemy health dot take health. So now we're calling that method an enemy called take health, and we're passing damage through that method. So this damage is being passed through that method, and whatever this number is from the random selection of a number, it's going to get passed through that. It's going to get passed through that method, and then it's going to come out of this method, and health is going to be subtracted by that damage. So let's say this is 4. 4 is going to get passed through here, and 4 is going to come out through here, and so health minus 4. All right, and then we're going to set this game object false. Okay, so those are the simple parts. And just make sure you have your enemy health attached to your enemy prefab, and your projectile attached to your projectile that we created earlier. Hold on, let it compile, and I'll get over there and look at it. So remember, we created this projectile, and remember that you have to drag this from your hierarchy into your prefab folder in order to make a prefab. But you should already have this script added to it. Go ahead and set your minimum, maximum damage and your speed, and you can change that in your prefab, and it changes it for all the objects that are spawned. And we are going to do a pool of this object at some point, but not this time. So basic beam. All right, so mine is going to be a space sci-fi kind of theme thing, but you don't have to call it basic beam. Like if you want it to be a medieval theme, you can call it basic fireball or basic arrow or whatever you want to call it. So inside of my player folder, player object, excuse me, in my hierarchy, I created an empty object. So right click on your player, create empty. And when you do that, it'll come up game object, and just name it to whatever you want to name it to. So on this, I don't think it needs a rigid body, so I'm going to remove that component. So on this, it does not need a circle collider either. Alright, so add your basic beam script, or whatever you named it, to your weapon. So your weapon script is what you can call it. Basic weapon. You know, we're going to create different types of weapons, so you know we want to differentiate between the weapons. So like I said, mine is, what is going on here? Alright, let me change this name back. It got messed up. Alright, so mine is called basic beam because mine is going to end up being a space shooter. So let me go back to see. So in my scripts, my player script, projectile, I have basic beam projectile. This is where I put all the stuff. I'm sorry, I should have said that. So I have basic beam projectile, and then I have basic beam, which is the thing that is actually going to shoot the beam. All right, so this code is complicated, so we're going to take it a little bit at a time. These are the floats and the game object don't think we need this layer mask. Let me see if it's being called anywhere. Yeah, we don't need that. It don't need the layer mask, so get rid of that. Okay, so we need the game object projectile, and we need a game object target, because this is what's going to tell us what to shoot. So first, we're going to go over this method, find closest enemy. Alright, so find closest enemy. This is probably the toughest part about this. So we're going to make a float called distance to enemy, distance to closest enemy, and it's going to equal math.infinity. So if it's null, it'll shoot out forever. You know, it's just, there is no enemy there. So enemy movement, which is what I named my basic enemy script. You can call it enemy, you can call it your script, whatever you want to, but whatever you called your enemy script, you need to have that as the name of this. So closest enemy equals null. So this object that has this enemy movement on it, okay, so enemy movement array, all enemies, equals the game object dot find objects of type enemy movement. All right, so that's going to call all the objects in the scene that have enemy movement and put it in this array. So for each member of enemy movement, so each enemy movement and all enemies. So you could also say for each variable in enemy, each variable in all enemies. So each variable current enemy in all enemies. So you can call this whatever you want to, but this has to be the name of this list. Alright, so in that, we're going to have a float called distance to enemy, and that's going to equal current enemy. Alright, so dot transform position minus this dot transform position dot square magnitude. So this position minus, excuse me, current enemy minus this position square magnitude. Excuse me. Okay, so if distance to enemy is less than closest distance to closest enemy, so if this is less than math infinity, basically, distance to closest enemy equals distance to enemy. Alright, so however far that enemy is, this distance to closest enemy is going to equal that. And then closest enemy equals current enemy, and then target equals closest enemy dot game object. So this debug.drawline, all it's going to do is draw a line from our transform to the enemy's transform. Alright, I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. Alright, so now we're going to go back up to our update. I have this here, but I'm going to get rid of that and see if it works, because I was debugging something and I just had it there. Because what I want is if target equals null, and I guess we're all going to figure out if this works without that line of code there. If target equals null, then find closest enemy. If target does not equal null, fire delay, which this really needs to be outside of this, so because I want that fire delay always to count down. Again, debugging stuff. It happens, it's a thing. So anyway, vector 2 so if target does not equal null, vector2 equals target dot transform dot position minus transform position. Then the float angle equals math f dot atan 2 direction dot y direction dot x times math rad to degrees. Then quaternion rotation equals quaternion dot angle axis, and there you can see the definition of that. Oh, with the tooltip there. Angle, so this thing that we just did, angle and vector 3 forward. So this is the angle, the vector 3 forward, that's the z axis. So that's the axis that it's going to be rotating around. Then our transform dot rotation equals quaternion slurp, so we're going to rotate toward that point. Transform dot rotation plus rotation speed time. So we're going to rotate from our transform rotation, so from the current rotation to the rotation defined here in quaternion rotation at a speed of speed times time dot delta time. And if fire delay is less or equal to 0, then we're going to fire a projectile and reset our fire delay time. If the target is not active in the hierarchy, say we've locked on a target, we've shot it, killed it, now it's not active, we're going to set the target to null so it doesn't keep that target in the target spot. And then this will start all over again, find the closest enemy, and do all this stuff again. Alright, so let's see if this works. Alright, so it's working. It's not showing the line because it does show the line for just a split second, but that's because it's only calling it if the target is null. And so the projectile is not going up to 10 because, I don't know if you remember in the last video where I said that the number, the highest number doesn't get called. And I put, what was it? I put 4 to 10, and I just totally wasn't thinking about that. So it should be 4 to 11 if I want it to be at 10. So let's go back to that and change that real quick. So, yeah, so I have it set at 10, and I actually need to change that in my prefab. So set that to 11, and now I should get a few one-shot kills. Okay, so this is why I want to have closest enemy, find closest enemy, be called outside of if target is null, because now once it selects that target, that's the only one it's going to shoot at, even though there are closer enemies. Okay. So now when I shoot, whatever enemy is closest should be the one that gets shot at. Yeah, see, that one's closer, that one's closer, that one's closer. Yep. Alright, that works perfectly. Great. Alright, so this is kind of the basic loop of this game. Next is doing experience points and stuff like that. But I think that it'd be kind of neat to have some art in here. So I will, I'm going to make some videos about art, but I might have them in a different section, in a different playlist, just because I I want to just have this part for programming. So anyway, if you like this video, like it and subscribe. And if you want to follow me so I can support me on Patreon so I can create more videos more often, just follow me on Patreon and subscribe there. Alright, thanks. See you next time.